Hello players, today we are not going to look at any historical games. A few people have asked me to do videos on chess opening traps. So I thought of making a video on it. Chess games can be lost in just a few moves if you fall into a trap. In this video I will show you some common chess opening traps so that you can avoid them and use them against your opponents. Let's get started. This is really going to be a very interesting video, so I suggest you to watch it until the end without skipping. First, we shall discuss the traps related to white pieces, and later let us see a couple of traps for black pieces as well. Now we start off with the most common opening sequence of moves leading to the Italian game two knights defense. It starts with e4 and d4, then knight f3 and knight c6. Then bishop c4 and knight f6. Now white plays knight g5. This is a very famous attack known as fried lever attack. The idea behind this move is very obvious. The knight can capture this pawn and fork the queen and the rook, as the bishop is protecting the square. The only way to prevent this bishop attacking the square is to move this pawn to d5. Now pawn cross pawn and knight cross pawn. Black thinks he is very safe now as this knight is protected by this queen. But there is another beautiful attack for white, that is knight cross f7. Now there is a double attack on the queen and the rook, so black is forced to capture this knight. Now the queen comes out with a surprise check, queen f3 check, attacking the king as well as the knight. So after the king goes here, white can get the compensation for his sacrificed knight. Some people will become greedy and try to protect this knight, but that's even more dangerous. White can play knight c3. There is a triple attack on this knight now, and unfortunately the knight cannot be moved due to this bishop attacking the king. As you can see, the black's position is very pathetic. The king is in the middle of the board in the beginning of the game itself. Next we will look at the Ponziani opening. The game starts with e4 and d4, then knight f3 and knight c6, then c3. In this position, some people might play bishop c5, then white can play d4 and pawn cross pawn, pawn cross pawn. So now we have a very strong center and there is an attack on the bishop as well. That's a different story, but according to the chess database, most of the people play knight f6 in this position. Now d5, there are two options for black. He can either capture this pawn or this pawn. If black captures this, then white can play e4 attacking this knight, and then we can recapture this pawn and create a very strong center. But most people will try to capture this pawn instead of this pawn. Now d5, the knight cannot come here due to this move. The knight will be trapped. So the only square left for the knight is e7. Now we can capture this pawn and we have a very strong center. In this position, black will naturally play pawn d6. Your opponent wouldn't like your knight sitting at this square at the very beginning of the game. So obviously he will try to kick it away. At the same time, he can develop his bishop by this way, so anyone would naturally play pawn d6. In this scenario, you don't have to worry about this knight. You can play bishop b5 check. The king cannot move anywhere. He cannot block this with the bishop as well. Then bishop cross bishop will win the queen. So the only way to block this is by playing pawn c6, then pawn cross pawn. Now black cannot happily capture this knight. There is a big threat here. There will be an open check by this bishop and the queen will be gone. So black will be forced to capture this. Then knight cross pawn, knight cross knight, bishop cross knight, and there is a triple attack in this position. White is clearly winning. The next trap is related to Goring gambit. The game starts with e4, d4 and knight f6 and knight c6. Then d5, e cross d5, then c3, d cross c3. This is Goring gambit. Then d6, bishop c4. In this position, more than 90% of the people play bishop g4. They try to pin this knight as the queen is behind, but you shouldn't actually worry about that. You can castle in this position. Now black will obviously try to exploit this pin by playing knight e5. There is a double attack on the bishop and the knight. In this position, most people will play bishop e2. Everyone thinks this is the safest move. The bishop is also saved and the pin is also prevented now. But that's not the case. You really don't have to play that move. You can just go ahead and capture this knight. Now your opponent thinks you made a big blunder and captures this free queen. But then white has a stunning move. Bishop cross f7 check. The king cannot come here due to this knight. The king is left with only one square, that is e7. And then knight d5 is a beautiful checkmate. The king cannot move to any of these squares. All the squares are protected by these three pieces. I really hope you loved this one. Let us look at a few examples for black. This trap is related to Queen's Gambit opening, and the Queen's Gambit starts like this. And now black plays Albin counter gambit, and here white usually captures this pawn, and we should move this pawn one step ahead. By playing this move, there will be a trouble in developing this knight. So white will naturally play e3, trying to attack this pawn. In this case, you shouldn't capture this pawn, then it will be a disaster for black. Instead, you can play bishop b4 check. White cannot block the check with this knight due to this pawn, so he will be forced to block with the bishop. Now d cross e3. He cannot capture this pawn with this bishop as the bishop is pinned. He can try capturing it with this pawn, but then his position becomes very worse. The king is open here. We can attack by this way, and the pawns are doubled in this e file. So compared to white, black really has a very good position, but there is another possibility in this position. That's the main line for this trap. In this case, instead of capturing this pawn, white now thinks this bishop is free to capture, and he captures this bishop. Most people will fall for this trap very easily. Now black plays pawn cross pawn check. Now if white captures this pawn, the queen will be gone. If your opponent realizes this and plays king e2, then still we have a very good move. You have to capture this knight, and you should not promote a queen. Instead, you should promote a knight at this place. That promotion comes with a check, and then rook cross knight, and then bishop g4 check. Now the king has to move and the queen will be gone. In this position, your opponent realizes this trap as well, and so he doesn't want to capture this knight. Instead, he played king e1. Now you can play queen h4 check. This square is protected by this knight, so white will naturally try to block it with this pawn. Then queen e4 check. This rook will be gone. As you can see, this is a clear win for black. Another must-know trap for you is the Blackburn shilling gambit. Here white plays bishop c4. Black plays knight d4. This is Blackburn shilling gambit. White thinks this is a free pawn, and then later he can attack the square, thereby forking the queen and the rook. But now black has a very good counter attack. You can play queen g5 attacking this knight. So white will obviously play knight cross f7 forking this queen and the rook. But you don't have to worry about this rook. Instead, you can go ahead and capture this pawn. Now your opponent's rook is under attack, so he will play rook f1. Then queen cross e4 check. Unfortunately, the king cannot move anywhere. He cannot block the check with this queen as well, as the knight will be able to capture this queen. So in this case, white will be forced to block the check with this bishop. And now comes the beautiful smothered mate. Knight f3 is a checkmate, as the king cannot move anywhere and he cannot capture this knight with this bishop due to this queen. This is indeed a very beautiful mate. I really hope you all enjoyed this video. If you really did, please hit the like button. That will motivate me to do more such videos like this. There are thousands of opening traps like these. If you really support me, I will try to post such videos more often. If you are watching my video for the first time, I recommend you to subscribe to my channel right now for more interesting chess contents. Let's meet in another battle. Thank you.